The story of the Zodiac Killer begins in the turbulent backdrop of the late 1960s. America was undergoing immense social changes, civil rights battles, anti-war protests, and a rising counterculture that spread through California. Amid this atmosphere of revolution and rebellion, Northern California would become home to one of the most terrifying and mysterious figures in criminal history, a serial killer who called himself the Zodiac. His crimes, communications, and riddles would leave investigators baffled for decades, creating a legacy that continues to haunt and fascinate the world. The first attacks linked to the Zodiac occurred in quiet, seemingly ordinary settings. Unlike many killers who focused on a single city, the Zodiac struck across different areas: Vallejo, Benicia, Napa, and San Francisco, turning much of Northern California into a hunting ground. What made him truly terrifying was not just his brutality, but his willingness to engage with the public through newspapers, boasting about his crimes and daring authorities to stop him. The confirmed timeline of Zodiac's violence began on December 20, 1968, when teenagers David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen went out for a date near Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. They were both shot and killed in a Lover's Lane area, a site that would later become infamous. Jensen was shot multiple times in the back as she ran, while Faraday was shot once in the head at close range. The attack was swift, merciless, and left little evidence. At first, police thought it could have been a personal dispute or a random act of violence. But months later, connections would emerge. On July 4, 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time in Vallejo. Darlene Ferrant, a young waitress, and her friend Mike Mageau were sitting in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park when a man approached them with a flashlight. Without warning, he opened fire with a handgun, shooting both victims multiple times. Ferrant died from her wounds, but Mageau survived, providing police with the first description of the shooter: a stocky white male, about 5'8" to 5'10", with short brown hair. This description would become central to later investigations, though eyewitness variations complicated the picture. Just days later, on July 31, 1969, three Bay Area newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times Herald, each received letters from someone claiming responsibility for both attacks. These letters were written in a disturbing, taunting style and included details only the killer could know. But the most haunting element was the inclusion of a cipher, a code made up of strange symbols. The writer demanded that the ciphers be published on the front pages of the newspapers, threatening more killings if his instructions were not followed. Sealing his letter with a symbol resembling a crosshair or bullseye, he introduced himself with chilling simplicity: "This is the Zodiac speaking." The press and police were stunned. Few criminals had ever engaged with the media so directly, let alone with puzzles that challenged the public to decode their meaning. The ciphers, known as the Zodiac 408, were eventually solved by a school teacher and his wife. The decoded message revealed a disturbing glimpse into the killer's mind. He claimed that killing was fun, compared it to hunting humans, and hinted that his murders would allow him to collect slaves for the afterlife. However, the message contained no clues to his real identity, only his twisted philosophy. Despite the fear spreading across the Bay Area, Zodiac did not stop. On September 27, 1969, he attacked college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Wearing a bizarre costume, a black hood with a white crosshair symbol, and a bib-like garment, he tied up the couple at knife point before stabbing them multiple times. Shepard later died from her injuries, while Hartnell survived to recount the horrifying ordeal. This attack was different because Zodiac not only escalated his brutality, but also openly revealed himself to his victims. Before leaving, he scrawled his symbol and a written message on Hartnell's car door, taking credit for the murders and listing his previous crimes. It was a grotesque signature, ensuring his legacy of terror was unmistakable. Just weeks later, on October 11, 1969, Zodiac struck again in San Francisco itself. Paul Stein, a cab driver, picked up a passenger who fatally shot him in the head. Unlike previous attacks, this was in an urban setting, with potential witnesses nearby. 3 teenagers saw the killer wipe down the taxi and walk away, giving police yet another description. Shockingly, police officers even encountered a man matching that description minutes after the murder, but let him go after a dispatcher mistakenly reported that they were looking for a black suspect. This blunder became one of the most infamous missed opportunities in the case. Soon after, Zodiac sent another letter to the Chronicle, this time including a piece of Stein's bloody shirt as proof of his crime. The letter contained new threats, including plans to attack a school bus full of children. He described how he could shoot out the tires and pick off the kiddies as they came bouncing out. This horrific imagery deepened public panic, and authorities began to take his threats with extreme seriousness. By this point, the Zodiac Killer was no longer just a local criminal. He had become a national headline. The combination of his brutal attacks, cryptic letters, and chilling threats turned him into a cultural figure of fear. Unlike other killers who tried to hide, Zodiac demanded attention, using the media as his stage. He seemed to thrive on the fear he generated, enjoying his role as a ghost-like predator who was always one step ahead of law enforcement. The first chapter of the Zodiac's reign of terror reveals a criminal unlike any other. He was not motivated solely by money, revenge, or even sexual gratification. Instead, he was driven by an obsession with power, control, and a perverse sense of fame. By inserting himself into public discourse, taunting police, and creating puzzles that remain unsolved decades later, the Zodiac carved out a space in history that no other killer quite occupies. Northern California in the late 1960s was already a region in flux, but the Zodiac's arrival cast a dark shadow across it. His crimes were brutal enough to terrify communities, but it was his words, the letters, the ciphers, the threats, that transformed him into something larger, a phantom who haunted the collective psyche. The question of who he was and why he killed became one of the most enduring mysteries in criminal history. As the killings and letters continued into the 1970s, the Zodiac's legacy grew, leaving behind a trail of unsolved questions, false leads, and shattered lives. But his reign was far from over. The following chapters will dive deeper into the investigation, the theories, and the enduring mystery that has made the Zodiac Killer a true crime obsession for over half a century. The investigation into the Zodiac Killer became one of the most complex and frustrating cases in American criminal history. From the very beginning, police departments across Northern California found themselves dealing with not only brutal crimes, but also a killer who thrived on manipulation, deception, and spectacle. Each new murder or letter forced law enforcement to react publicly, while the Zodiac himself seemed to dictate the pace of the investigation. The initial task facing investigators after the first confirmed attacks was to determine whether the murders were connected. The shooting of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen in December 1968 had been considered a tragic but isolated incident. However, when Darlene Ferrin was killed and Mike Mageau wounded in July 1969, and the letters began arriving at newspapers, the possibility of a serial killer became undeniable. The letters provided specific details about the crimes, such as the type of bullets used and positions of the bodies, that were never released to the public. This confirmed the writer was indeed the killer, and he wanted to make sure the world knew he was in control. Police now faced a criminal unlike any they had encountered. Most killers avoided public exposure, but the Zodiac demanded it. His letters to the San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, and the Vallejo Times Herald were not only confessions, but also threats, games, and taunts. He signed each communication with the now infamous crosshair symbol, instantly recognizable as his personal brand of terror. In his letters, he mocked the police for their inability to catch him, and even criticized them for mistakes in their investigation. His arrogance and lack of fear only fueled the obsession around his crimes. One of the earliest challenges came in August 1969, when the first cipher, known as the 408 character cipher, was cracked by Donald and Betty Harden, a schoolteacher, and his wife from Salinas, California. Their solution revealed Zodiac's disturbing philosophy. He claimed that killing people gave him the ultimate thrill, comparing it to hunting wild animals. He wrote that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife, suggesting that the people he killed would serve him in another world. But notably, the cipher revealed no identity, no name, and no clue about who he truly was. It was a chilling reminder that Zodiac's main goal was control and psychological dominance, not confession. As investigators scrambled to piece together patterns, Zodiac continued his campaign of terror. The Lake Berryessa attack in September 1969 presented detectives with a rare opportunity. A surviving victim who could describe the encounter in detail. Brian Hartnell told police that Zodiac approached him, and Cecilia, Shepard dressed in a bizarre black hood with a white crosshair symbol, speaking in a calm but commanding tone. Zodiac even claimed during the attack that he had just escaped from prison, adding yet another layer of deception. Hartnell's testimony confirmed what the letters had already shown. Zodiac enjoyed theater. He wanted his crimes to feel like staged performances, each one designed to deepen the legend he was building. The murder of cab driver Paul Stein in October 1969 further complicated the investigation. Unlike previous rural or semi-isolated attacks, this crime occurred in San Francisco's busy Presidio Heights neighborhood. 3 teenagers saw Zodiac leave the scene, and their detailed description was relayed to the police. Unfortunately, due to a dispatcher error, the responding officers were told to look for a black male suspect, which allowed the actual killer, described by witnesses as a white male in his 30s or 40s with glasses, to walk away. In hindsight, this mistake was one of the most devastating moments of the investigation. Police may have spoken directly with the Zodiac that night without realizing it. The Stein murder also triggered one of the most famous exchanges between Zodiac and the press. Shortly after the crime, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter, this time with a piece of Stein's blood-stained shirt enclosed as proof. Zodiac mocked the police once again and introduced perhaps his most terrifying threat. He described how he could shoot out the tires of a school bus and kill children as they exited. Whether he ever intended to carry out this plan remains unknown, but the mere possibility terrified the public. School buses in the Bay Area were soon accompanied by police escorts, illustrating the level of fear and disruption Zodiac had achieved with just a few words. Throughout 1969 and 1970, Zodiac continued to send letters filled with cryptic ciphers, puzzles, and taunts. Some included references to pop culture, such as quotes from The Mikado, a comic opera by Gilbert and Sullivan. Others contained symbols or coded messages that have still not been solved, most notably the infamous 340 character cipher, often referred to as the Z340. For over 50 years, this cipher puzzled professional cryptographers, amateur codebreakers, and even intelligence agencies. It was only in 2020 that a team of private citizens finally cracked the Z340 cipher, revealing another disturbing message in which Zodiac denied being afraid of the gas chamber and repeated his obsession with collecting slaves for the afterlife. Despite these breakthroughs, none of the ciphers ever revealed Zodiac's true identity. This was one of his most effective strategies, giving the public and investigators just enough to chase, but never enough to catch. Each cipher raised hope that a name might emerge, and each solution ended in disappointment. The frustration fueled public fascination, making Zodiac the ultimate unsolved riddle. Law enforcement efforts were widespread but fragmented. Multiple jurisdictions were involved. The Vallejo Police Department, Napa County Sheriff's Office, San Francisco Police Department, and the California Department of Justice, among others. Communication between these agencies was often poor, with important evidence and reports not always shared. The lack of centralized coordination hindered progress. Additionally, thousands of tips poured in from the public, many of them based on paranoia rumors or personal grudges. Sorting through them consumed valuable time and resources. At the same time, Zodiac's identity was shrouded in mystery because of the contradictions in eyewitness accounts. Survivors and witnesses described him as a stocky white male, approximately 5'8" to 6 feet tall, with short brown hair and possibly glasses. But some reports suggested variations in his build, age, and even hair color. Whether this was due to natural differences in perception, disguises, or deliberate misdirection on Zodiac's part remains unknown. These inconsistencies made creating a definitive profile almost impossible. The FBI eventually joined the investigation, adding their resources to analyze ciphers, handwriting, and other evidence. However, even with federal involvement, the case refused to yield answers. Handwriting experts examined Zodiac's letters extensively, but the results were inconclusive. Some suspects' handwriting appeared similar, but no match was strong enough to hold up in court. Fingerprints and DNA were either too degraded, contaminated, or never conclusively tied to the killer. One of the most haunting aspects of the case was Zodiac's ability to vanish. After each attack or letter, he seemed to disappear without leaving a solid trail. The crime scenes yielded few clues, and the physical evidence that was collected often led nowhere. Zodiac was careful, methodical, and sometimes lucky. He knew how to strike and then retreat into the shadows, allowing his words to carry on his terror long after he was gone. By the early 1970s, the investigation had consumed countless hours of manpower, yet authorities were no closer to identifying the killer. The sheer scale of the mystery, combined with Zodiac's mastery of psychological warfare, ensured that he remained an unsolved figure. Each letter reignited the case, and each unsolved cipher deepened the obsession. The Zodiac investigation revealed not just a killer, but a new type of criminal, one who understood the media, exploited fear, and manipulated the system to his advantage. His ability to turn his crimes into a narrative, to make himself the central character in a dark drama, ensured that his legacy would outlive the crimes themselves for the police. The challenge was not only solving murders, but also keeping up with a killer who seemed to delight in making them look powerless. As the 1970s progressed, investigators faced increasing pressure to deliver answers. Suspects began to emerge, some compelling and others less so. But no matter how close authorities believed they were, Zodiac always slipped away. The hunt for his true identity was far from over. In the next chapter, we will examine the primary suspects, the evidence against them, and the many theories that continue to swirl around the Zodiac's elusive face. The search for the Zodiac Killer's identity has stretched across decades, spawning countless theories, endless debates, and a revolving list of suspects. Some suspects have been considered extremely compelling, while others emerged from speculation, coincidences, or even hoaxes. What makes the Zodiac case so enduring is not just the brutality of the crimes, but the frustrating fact that, despite thousands of tips and decades of investigation, no one has ever been definitively proven to be the killer. From the very beginning, police and journalists knew that the Zodiac enjoyed playing games. His ciphers suggested he wanted people to chase his clues, but never actually reach him. This created fertile ground for speculation, and over the years, the pool of potential suspects grew into the dozens. While some names became central to the investigation, others were dismissed quickly. Still, each theory seemed to add to the Zodiac's mystique, making him a shadow that could never be fully caught. One of the most famous and persistent suspects was Arthur Leigh Allen, a schoolteacher from Vallejo. Allen came under scrutiny in the early 1970s after a friend reported suspicious conversations. Allen allegedly spoke about wanting to hunt people with a flashlight attached to a gun, eerily similar to how Mike Mageau and Darlene Ferrin were attacked at Blue Rock Springs. He also owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch that bore the same crosshair symbol used by the killer, adding to suspicion. Allen lived near many of the crime scenes, and his physical description matched several eyewitness accounts. A stocky white male in his 30s or 40s. Police interrogated Allen multiple times, and search warrants were executed at his home. They discovered disturbing items, including weapons and tapes of pornography involving children, reinforcing the idea that he was capable of extreme violence. However, handwriting experts determined that Allen's writing did not match Zodiac's letters, and fingerprint comparisons failed to link him to the case. Later, DNA analysis on evidence from Zodiac letters did not match Allen's genetic profile. While Allen remained a prime suspect for many investigators, the lack of conclusive evidence meant he was never charged. He died in 1992, leaving behind an aura of suspicion, but no definitive proof of guilt. Another notable suspect was Rick Marshall, a movie projectionist who lived in the Bay Area. Marshall was known for his eccentric personality and obsession with films, and some theorists believed that Zodiac's references to movies like The Mikado could tie back to Marshall's interests. His handwriting was also analyzed, and while some similarities existed, experts could not confirm a match, much like Allen. Marshall became a figure of intrigue, but ultimately was never proven to be the killer. A third suspect, Lawrence Kane, attracted attention because of his criminal background and his connections to locations near Zodiac crimes. Kane had been arrested multiple times for sexual offenses and lived in the same region as some of the victims. He also reportedly matched eyewitness descriptions and had suffered a brain injury that allegedly affected his impulse control. Some amateur investigators argued that Kane's appearance bore resemblance to police sketches of the Zodiac. Yet again, DNA comparisons ruled him out decades later. The suspect pool did not end there. Richard Gaikowski, a journalist, was also suspected by some due to his anti-establishment writings and cryptic behavior. Another, Earl Van Best Jr., was accused by his own son in a 2014 book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. The son claimed handwriting analysis proved his father wrote Zodiac's letters, and even suggested that police sketches resembled him. These claims attracted public attention, but were met with skepticism by experts. Many other names have surfaced over time, from military veterans to random drifters, each theory bringing renewed debate but little resolution. Beyond individual suspects, theories have circulated that Zodiac might have had law enforcement or military training. His ability to vanish after attacks, his use of codes, and his tactical approach to crime scenes suggested to some investigators that he was more than just a random killer. Others believed he might have been deeply familiar with the Bay Area geography, possibly a local resident who knew secluded spots where couples often went. The contradictions in eyewitness accounts only fueled uncertainty. At Lake Berryessa, for example, Brian Hartnell described Zodiac's voice as calm and somewhat monotone, while other witnesses described the killer as agitated or aggressive. Some sketches depicted him with glasses, others without. Was this the result of disguises, natural variance in perception, or perhaps multiple individuals involved? While the majority of experts agree Zodiac acted alone, theories of accomplices or copycats have lingered for decades. In addition to suspects, countless amateur sleuths have obsessed over Zodiac's ciphers, searching for hidden clues about his identity. The solved 408 character cipher revealed only his twisted worldview, but others, like the 340 character cipher, created decades of speculation. Some believed the ciphers contained a name or initials, while others argued they were deliberately unsolvable, designed to frustrate investigators and keep the killer's anonymity intact. When the Z340 was finally solved in 2020, the message once again lacked identifying information, supporting the idea that Zodiac never intended to reveal who he was. False leads plagued the investigation. Tips flooded in after nearly every newspaper article or new letter. People reported neighbors, co-workers, or even family members as potential Zodiacs. At times, police departments were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of possible suspects. Some hoax letters also arrived, imitating Zodiac's style, further muddying the waters. While many of these fakes were identified, they demonstrated how the case had captured public imagination and paranoia. Theories about Zodiac's identity have also crossed into cultural speculation. Some have linked him to other unsolved cases, like the murder of Cherry Joe Bates in Riverside, California, in 1966, which occurred before the confirmed Zodiac killings. A mysterious letter connected to Bates' murder bore similarities to Zodiac's style, leading some investigators to believe it was his earliest crime. Others argue the connection is weak, but the debate continues. Still others theorize Zodiac may have stopped killing altogether, either due to fear of capture, imprisonment for unrelated crimes, or death. The last widely accepted Zodiac letter arrived in 1974, referencing the movie The Exorcist and mocking it as the best satirical comedy I have ever seen. After that, the communication stopped and no confirmed murders were linked to him. Did he vanish? Or did he continue his crimes under different guises? The absence of closure has allowed speculation to thrive endlessly. For investigators, each suspect carried both promise and disappointment. Arthur Leigh Allen seemed so close to being the answer, yet DNA evidence ruled him out. Lawrence Kane, Rick Marshall, and Richard Gaikowski all had compelling circumstantial links, but none could be tied definitively to the crimes. Each time a lead crumbled, it added to the myth Zodiac remained untouchable, an enigma who outsmarted generations of detectives. In the world of true crime, very few cases inspire such relentless theorizing. The Zodiac Killer has become a template for mystery, the perfect storm of brutality, taunts, and lack of resolution. Every new book, documentary, or online forum thread breathes fresh life into the question of his identity. Amateur investigators still pore over letters and crime scene reports, convinced that the answer lies hidden in plain sight. The enduring fascination with suspects and theories speaks to something deeper, the human need for answers. Zodiac represented not just a killer, but a challenge, a puzzle that dared people to solve it. Every name added to the suspect list offered the possibility of closure, only for that hope to collapse into more questions. As the decades passed, the Zodiac Killer's mystery evolved from an active investigation into a cultural phenomenon. His letters and symbols are now etched into American folklore. His crimes studied not only by detectives, but also by journalists, authors, and countless true crime enthusiasts. Each theory, no matter how unlikely, adds another layer to the legend of a killer who refused to be known. But suspects and speculation alone cannot explain why the Zodiac has remained so infamous. To understand that, we must look at his legacy, the way he shaped true crime culture, inspired media portrayals, and became a symbol of unsolved terror. That legacy, still alive more than 50 years later, will be explored in the final chapter. The Zodiac Killer's story did not end with his last letter in 1974. In many ways, that was only the beginning of his transformation from a criminal into a cultural legend. While his real identity has never been confirmed, his crimes and communications reshaped the relationship between killers, the media, and the public. His ability to dominate headlines, taunt investigators, and inspire decades of speculation turned him into a figure who has transcended time. More than 50 years later, the Zodiac Killer is still spoken of not only as a murderer, but as a symbol of unsolved terror. The most immediate legacy of the Zodiac was fear. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the San Francisco Bay Area was consumed by anxiety. Couples avoided quiet, secluded areas where they might once have gone to enjoy a peaceful evening. Parents worried about their children riding school buses, haunted by Zodiac's threats to attack them. Even walking city streets in San Francisco carried an edge of unease, especially after the brazen murder of cab driver Paul Stein. Unlike other serial killers, whose crimes often remained hidden until they were caught, Zodiac broadcasted his violence. By writing to newspapers, he made sure his words reached everyone, magnifying fear beyond his actual crimes. But fear alone does not explain the Zodiac's enduring grip on the public imagination. Part of his legacy lies in how he understood the media. He was not simply a killer. He was a performer who treated each crime and letter as acts in a chilling drama. He manipulated journalists, threatened mass violence, and forced newspapers to publish his letters under the threat of more killings. This was a radical departure from typical criminal behavior of the time. Instead of hiding in the shadows, he thrived in the spotlight, using the press as his stage. This strategy made Zodiac one of the first modern killers to create a brand for himself. His crosshair symbol was instantly recognizable, almost like a corporate logo. His phrase, "This is the Zodiac speaking" became a chilling tagline. He blurred the line between reality and performance, creating an identity larger than life. This branding not only amplified his terror during his active years, but ensured that his persona would endure long after his crime stopped. The unsolved nature of the case has also fueled Zodiac's legend. In cases like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, or the Son of Sam, the killers were eventually captured and unmasked. Their stories, while horrifying, had an ending. Zodiac's story does not. His ciphers, his taunts, and his crimes remain open-ended, a mystery that invites endless speculation. Humans are naturally drawn to puzzles, and Zodiac provided one of the most infamous, unsolved puzzles in criminal history. The lack of closure has kept him relevant, ensuring that every new development, whether a suspect's DNA test or a solved cipher, revives interest. The Zodiac also shaped law enforcement practices. His letters demonstrated how a criminal could manipulate the media to spread fear, forcing police departments to adapt in how they communicated with the press. The massive scale of the investigation, involving multiple jurisdictions, highlighted the need for better interagency cooperation. The FBI's involvement, particularly in cipher analysis, underscored the growing role of federal resources in solving complex cases, while police never caught him. The lessons learned from the Zodiac investigation influenced how future cases were approached, especially those involving public threats. Culturally, the Zodiac has inspired an enormous body of media. His crimes and mystery have been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and films. Perhaps most famously, David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac brought the case to a new generation, dramatizing the investigation and obsession surrounding it. The film emphasized how the case consumed journalists and detectives, showing how Zodiac's mystery was as devastating as his crimes. Other films and television shows have borrowed from Zodiac's imagery, from his ciphers to his crosshair logo, cementing his place in pop culture as the archetypal mysterious killer. Even music and literature have not escaped his shadow. References to the Zodiac appear in song lyrics, novels, and comics, often using him as a symbol of unsolvable evil. Internet culture, too, has embraced him. Entire online communities exist to dissect his ciphers, debate suspects, and propose theories. In this way, Zodiac's legacy lives on not only as a criminal case, but as a participatory mystery, inviting anyone with curiosity and determination to try to solve it. The enduring fascination with Zodiac also reveals something about society's relationship with crime. People are not only horrified by violence, they are intrigued by the psychology of those who commit it. Zodiac's combination of brutality and intelligence, cruelty and theatricality makes him uniquely compelling. He is not remembered as just another murderer, but as a riddle that seems to defy resolution. This fascination has blurred the lines between justice and entertainment, raising ethical questions about how much attention should be given to killers who crave notoriety. Technological advances have periodically reignited hope that the case might one day be solved. The rise of DNA profiling in the 1990s and early 2000s led investigators to re-examine old evidence, though results have remained inconclusive. In 2018, the arrest of the Golden State Killer through genetic genealogy sparked renewed optimism that Zodiac might also be identified. Yet, despite testing DNA from his letters and comparing it to suspects, no definitive match has been found. Each failure deepens the myth. Zodiac remains the killer who slipped through history's fingers. The solving of the Z340 cipher in 2020 provided a rare breakthrough. A team of private cryptographers from around the world worked together to finally decode the message, which reaffirmed Zodiac's twisted worldview, but offered no clues to his identity. That accomplishment reminded the world that the case is not frozen in time. Advances in technology and collaboration can still uncover pieces of the puzzle, but the absence of a name once again reinforced the unsolved core of the mystery. The Zodiac's impact can also be seen in how he influenced future criminals. Later killers, including the BTK Strangler and the Unabomber, also wrote letters to the press, adopting some of the same strategies of communication and manipulation. While their crimes were different, the idea of controlling a narrative through direct engagement with the media can be traced back to Zodiac. He showed that terror could be amplified not only by violence but by words. Ultimately, the Zodiac Killer's legacy is one of contradictions. He is both absent and omnipresent, never caught, never confirmed, yet always remembered. His crimes, while limited in number compared to some serial killers, created an outsized impact because of how he framed them. His mystery has become part of American folklore, a reminder of both the limits of justice and the endless hunger for answers. As we look back on the Zodiac case more than half a century later, we see a story that is about more than murder. It is a story about obsession. His obsession with control, the police's obsession with catching him, the public's obsession with solving the puzzle, and our collective obsession with mysteries that resist closure. The Zodiac Killer remains a phantom who lived in the real world, but now exists in legend, half criminal, half myth. Perhaps one day technology will finally pierce the veil and reveal his identity. Perhaps a DNA sample, a forgotten clue, or a hidden confession will provide closure. But even if that happens, the cultural shadow of the Zodiac Killer will remain. His story is not just about who he was, but about what he became: a symbol of fear, a puzzle without an answer, and one of the most haunting legacies in the history of crime.